Hey everybody, Jace here. Just want to remind you that on every one of these 12 days of the Comic Source videos, you can win 1 month free of Global Comix. And on Christmas Day, we'll be giving away a free year of Global Comix. All you have to do to enter is just go over to the YouTube channel and leave a comment on any particular episode that you've checked out. If you listen to it audio only, again, just head over to YouTube, do a search for the Comic Source. Leave a comment, and everybody who enters a comment for a particular video, I will select at random a person for that video to win the code to get a month of free Global Comix, which is the premier destination for digital comics. Got the best user interface I've ever seen for digital comics. You can read comics on your phone. Over 375,000 comics so far in the library. It's growing daily, so it doesn't cost you a thing to check it out. Again, just leave a comment on the YouTube video for any of the 12 days of the Comic Source YouTube videos, and you'll be entered to win. So hope everybody's having a really fun and enjoyable holiday season, and thanks for joining us for these 12 days of the Comic Source episodes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Comic Source Podcast. I'm your host, Jace. This is another of our 12 Days of the Comic Source episodes, and today I'm going to be talking about Klaus by Grant Morrison, illustrated by Dan Mora. We have letters by Ed Dukeshire, and I wanted to finish up the 12 Days of the Comic Source with a couple of books that really sort of encapsulate the holiday season and Christmas, but also really showcase what's possible in comics. So the penultimate episode was about Batman Noel by Lee Bermejo, where you're basically taking the classic Dickens story of A Christmas Carol and you're basically overlaying Batman and Joker and such, the DC universe itself, onto that story. And I think it works very well. And now we're going even further with this last story. We're doing Klaus by Grant Morrison. And, I talk all the time about how I'm not a big Grant Morrison fan. And I think part of it is he pulls in so much like history and weird kind of storytelling when he's in a universe, basically in the DC universe, and he's pulling from all these obscure Silver Age kind of stuff, and it's easy to get lost. But here we have him creating something whole cloth, and that's where I think Morrison works best. So this is from Boom. And it was originally supposed to be a 6-issue miniseries. It eventually got expanded to 7 issues, and then there have been 3 one-shots, I think, since this originally came out, because this came out starting in 2015. I haven't read any of the one-shots, but I'm sure they're good, and I will read them at some point, because when you talk about Klaus, that's Klaus. People think, oh, Claus, like Santa Claus, right? And that's what this is. This is the story, Grant Morrison basically creating the legend of Santa Claus. But what's interesting is he doesn't take it from the perspective of, okay, let me tell a story that's for kids, right? He's in full Morrison form. Not that I think that kids wouldn't enjoy this. I mean, there's nothing ultra violent about it, or nothing that makes it inappropriate for kids, at least, kids around 9 or 10. There's a lot of sort of fantastic elements and fantasy elements that are sort of timeless. Things like dragons and evil barons and magic and, spirits and things like that. And it all works really well. But Morrison never talks down. He doesn't condescend with this story, which is something that Morrison often does. But like I said before, the problem with that is oftentimes so much of it will go over people's heads because they just don't have the knowledge. They just don't have the history with the material. They're not pulling from back matter the way Morrison is with his crazy amount of knowledge about the DC universe or comics history in general. So Klaus is basically a story of a kingdom that's fallen on dark and hard times, and their Yuletide season, their Yuletide festival is now looked down upon. You know, everybody's forced to work for the Baron, who is, you know, a subject of the king, who's charged with keeping order in this particular part of the kingdom, but he's not supposed to be basically with his foot on the throat of the subjects that live there. And he's kind of fallen under the spell of some kind of evil force. And again, I don't want to give too much away because I want you to read it for yourself. But he's fallen under the sway of that, and he's not a very beloved figure whatsoever. He's persecuting these people. He's working them to death. He's forbidden toys to the children. So yeah, there's some cliches here and some parallels with other stories when you talk about the legend of Santa Claus or Kris Kringle or what have you. But what's great about it is the way that Klaus himself is pulled into the story, like his backstory and his history with this town, with this part of the kingdom, and why things are the way they are in Grimsvang, as it's known, and eventually him getting his powers and his love for the people of Grimsvang. And it's just honestly, I feel like, I don't want to sound like I'm overly surprised that Grant Morrison was to create such a timeless and heartfelt tale. But in a way I am, because I've never read anything that Morrison has done like this before. And then when you add in the incredible art by Dan Mora, where this is really where I first discovered Mora's art, where I was like, man, this line work, the storytelling, it all works really, really well. The color work is spectacular also. You know, now Mora's going to be working on some DC properties, and that's great. I can't wait to see him bring his aesthetic to DC. But this is a fun story. It's heartfelt. There are parts of it that are where Morrison brings in humor. I don't know. It's hard. It's really hard for me to put into words just how successful this is as an origin story for Claus. It's almost like I just would never have guessed Morrison would tell a story this way, because again, there's so much to it that's not necessarily coming from a place of like intellectual stimulation. It comes from emotion and from heart. And I mean, Morrison, he's done it before in things like All-Star Superman, but again, it just works so well on so many levels. It's a very compelling story as well. Like, it came out monthly, but as you were reading it, you couldn't wait for the next chapter. You know, it was one of those things where as you read each chapter and learned more and more about the characters, you definitely wanted to know what was happening. The tension was building. How was Klaus going to come out? Because in the end, you know he's going to win, right? He's Santa Claus, or become Santa Claus. But you definitely wanted to understand what was happening. I think the characters are sufficiently fleshed out. They're not just two-dimensional, with maybe the exception of the Baron. But even he gets a little bit of redemption at the end in terms of like motivation, and you kind of understand where he's coming from. I don't know that I'd go so far as to say you sympathize with him, but you definitely understand where he's coming from. The Baron's son, who's kind of the spoiled brat in the story, is redeemed, as is the Baron's wife. And so all in all, it just works really, really well as a wonderful Christmas story. It's not, super bright and happy the whole time. There's definitely consequences. There's, evil monsters, and there's sword fights and chains and magic spells, both good and bad. So it has some texture to it. This isn't Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or Frosty the Snowman kind of thing. It is a bit darker and more violent than that. But I think for children of a certain age, it's great. 10, 12 years old, it's a story that they'll probably really enjoy. And the artwork, as I said, by Mora is amazing. And there's a couple of sequences in the end of the last few pages that really set up, hey, this is who Santa Claus is. This is his origin. And maybe it's gotten a little whitewashed over the years and, you know, kind of a little more adjusted for a G rating, but this could really be where it all started, right? Where the legends of Santa Claus all started. And it's a great story. It's fun. The color work in the end is exactly what you want. I mean, really all throughout, but when you get to the end, those last few pages, like I was saying, that's where the real, you know, feel of the season, the real sense of happiness once everything has been resolved sort of takes over. And it's a great story. So Klaus by Grant Morrison and Dan Mora, you can pick it up in trade. I think it's, again, one of those comics that really shows the power of the medium and how you can tell any story in comics, even a great Christmas story, Origin of Santa Claus. And it's one of those books that I think, along with Batman Noel, can be a holiday tradition that you read this. And it's long enough that you could divide it up, you know, do like a Christmas countdown and read a little bit of it each night heading into Christmas and have this really cool origin of Santa Claus, especially if you have boys and they, you know, tend to like things a little more fantastical and sword fights and monsters and things like that. So it's really great. Highly recommend it. So that's going to do it. This is the last episode of our 12 days of the Comic Source. I hope you all have enjoyed the extra content that we've put out for you. Thanks for all the support this year, and specifically with these 12 days of the Comic Source episodes. We've put out a lot of extra content. You guys have been there for us, downloading it and listening to it and giving us good comments. So we really appreciate that. We want to wish everybody the happiest of Christmases. Have a great holiday season. Stay safe, stay healthy. We're all looking forward to better times in 2021. Hopefully we'll be able to return to comic conventions at some point in the next year. So we're looking forward to all of that. So our best to you and your families in this holiday season. And we wouldn't be here if you weren't here to listen to all the episodes. So again, thank you. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
You can find the Comic Source podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or whichever podcasting app you prefer. Please tell all your friends about us, subscribe, and rate us. The ratings really help with our visibility and our ability to reach new listeners, especially 5-star reviews on Apple. Also be sure to visit us at lrmonline.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover all our other great pop culture content. If you want to email us, the email address is thecomicsourceblog@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/thecomicsource. Do a search for The Comic Source on Facebook and Instagram to follow us on those social platforms. All 3 spots are great places to find out when we release new episodes, as well as follow all our convention coverage. So once again, we want to thank everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.